Disclaimer: the following video can contain spoilers. When Riley, Kensington Tallman, begins puberty, headquarters expands, making room for new emotions that would give the old gang hardships. Inside Out 2 continues with Riley's story and continues with what I really enjoyed from the first movie. Creative and humorous, subtle and not so subtle ways of showing how things work inside the mind.
This is for all those memories that belong in the back of the mind. It's weighing on her, so let's lighten the load. We're not gonna think about that right now. Woo!
In Inside Out 2, we are introduced to something new. Beliefs, the back of the mind, and many more. Though I do question how in Inside Out 2 there was no mentions or indications of islands breaking as the first movie did, and instead centered around this new mechanic known as beliefs instead. I don't think it led to bad storytelling. Instead, the movie plays along with these new mechanics in ways that I found very interesting. With that said, let's begin. The movie opens up by recounting various things from the first movie, having the audience remember details such as Riley being a part of the hockey team, each emotion and their tasks, to how things work at headquarters. When Riley is benched for aggression, Joy, Amy Poehler, uses that time to tell us new information that will play a pivotal role in the movie. Exposition, in other words. And although it does seem like it somewhat comes out of left field, I don't think it was an odd placement. We also see in the movie the back of the mind, which will come back into play later on, and the elevator that takes you down to where Riley develops her sense of self or her beliefs. I would like to mention how smart some of these aspects are. They essentially tell us, visually, something I find rather unexplainable. The mind works in mysterious ways, yet this movie makes it seem almost like an informative visual representation of how the mind works. And it was executed very well, in my opinion. It wouldn't be until puberty strikes when things go awry. The console seems broken, but worst of all, headquarters is being remodeled, making room for new emotions. We are introduced to anxiety, Maya Hawke, who really gave us her character in her introduction and how she might pose a threat to not only Riley, but to the original crew. So when the new emotions take over, they become a major threat to both the crew and to Riley because anything they do affects how Riley feels. From here on after, there's one goal in mind, but it seems almost impossible to achieve because there's conflicts coming from every direction, which I found, once again, amazing because they stemmed from actions caused by anxiety at headquarters, which was executed humorously and effectively.
Send up every possible thing that could go wrong. We are looking to the future.
Joy, reality is also a thing.
Bring it on, coppers! Oh, no.
These creative decisions, like using Riley's imagination against her, paints a vivid image of how things possibly work inside the mind, while also being a very good form of storytelling in my opinion. But what I found most fascinating about the movie is how we got two stories mashed into one. Riley's story is one we've seen in several movies before, and the emotion story is a separate story, and yet the same one. It was genius. Not only do we see Riley's story, we get to see how the mind works within this scenario, while altogether being its own separate story. The crazy part is how even though it's just one character, the antagonistic element or character is present in both of these stories. Anxiety being the leader of these new emotions, and her step-by-step plan and wariness gets in the way too often that it eventually hurts Riley more than it does help her. The cool part is that joy and anxiety are similar. We're both, in a way, we're forcing Riley to be somebody that they chose instead of allowing her to choose for herself.
We don't get to choose who Riley is.
We keep the best and toss the rest.
So I found it cool that this movie yet again accomplishes something that the first one did. And that is, it's okay to feel this way. These emotions make up who you are. Every emotion counts and is important.
I don't know. how to stop anxiety. Maybe we can't. Maybe this is what happens when you grow up. You feel less joy.
The only confusing thing about the movie, I will say, was how part of the complexity and mechanics from the first movie aren't presented in this one. I'm, again, mainly referring to the islands and them breaking. Mainly because I thought these islands were the ones who made up who Riley was, if I'm not mistaken. And her changing in the second movie, there didn't seem to have any indications of these islands breaking. Instead, through the help of anxiety, Riley was changing because her sense of self and her beliefs were changing, which, don't get me wrong, was executed well. I was just confused on how the islands played a part in this movie, or I guess the lack of. Overall, Inside Out 2 was a very good movie, one I enjoyed for its writing, story, and animation. My favorite aspect of the movie is seeing how things are incorporated into the story while, in a way, showing us how things work inside the mind. And that panic attack scene? Spectacular.
You need to let her go.
In the end, Inside Out 2 was a very enjoyable film that took its time to provide a very compelling story with great execution, which I loved. But anyways, those are just my thoughts. Did you enjoy the movie? Let me know what you thought about it down below, and I'll see you in the next review. Until then, God bless.